Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
I remember the exact moment our worlds collided. October 15th, 11:47 p.m. I know because I was staring at the clock, willing my shift to end when the trauma bay doors exploded open. A motorcycle accident, severe head trauma, internal bleeding. The works. And there she was, this force of nature in scrubs, barking orders with the kind of authority that made seasoned doctors step aside. "Dr. Russell," she called out, not even looking in my direction. "I need those hands over here, now." I'd been Hannah Russell, MD, for 3 years by then, chief resident in neurosurgery. I was used to being the one giving orders, not taking them from a nurse, even if she was the charge nurse of the trauma unit. But something in her voice, something in the way she moved like she owned every inch of that room, made me listen. "Talk to me," I said, scrubbing in beside her. 23-year-old male, motorcycle versus semi. Multiple fractures, possible spleen laceration, and... She paused, her green eyes meeting mine for the first time, and what looks like a depressed skull fracture that's going to need your magic touch. Magic touch. Even in crisis, she had this way of making everything sound less terrifying. The surgery lasted 4 hours. 4 hours of working in perfect synchronization with someone I'd barely spoken to before that night. She anticipated every move I made, had every instrument ready before I asked, and somehow managed to keep the patient stable while I performed what would later be called a textbook example of neurosurgical excellence by the department head. But I wasn't thinking about textbooks when we finally closed. I was thinking about how Cassandra's hair had escaped her surgical cap in these perfect golden wisps, and how she'd bit her lower lip when she concentrated, and how when she smiled at me after we heard those beautiful words, "stable condition," my entire world shifted on its axis. "Coffee?" she asked, pulling off her gloves. "It's 4 a.m., I replied, suddenly aware of how exhausted I should have been. "Exactly, prime coffee time." And that's how I found myself in the doctor's lounge at dawn, learning that Cassandra Perry took her coffee black with a pinch of cinnamon, that she'd been a trauma nurse for 7 years, and that she had this laugh that could probably cure depression if we could bottle it. "You're not what I expected," she said, settling into the worn couch across from me. "What did you expect?" "Honestly, another uptight surgeon with a god complex." She grinned. "But you actually listen, and you say please and thank you to the nurses? Do you know how rare that is?" I felt heat creep up my neck. My mother raised me right. Smart woman. Cassandra's eyes lingered on my face just a beat too long. She should be proud. That first conversation lasted until my pager buzzed with another emergency. But as I rushed off to the next crisis, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. Not just in my night, but in me. The next 2 weeks became a carefully choreographed dance of professional interactions laced with something electric. I started volunteering for trauma cases I had no business being on, just for the chance to work alongside her. She began finding reasons to consult with neurosurgery on cases that barely required it. "Dr. Russell," she'd say formally when other staff were around, "could I get your opinion on this patient's head CT?" But when it was just us, when we were alone in supply closets, grabbing equipment or passing each other in empty hallways, the formality would slip. "Hannah," she'd whisper my name like a prayer on her lips. I memorized everything about those moments. The way she'd brush imaginary lint off my coat just to touch me. How she'd lean just a little too close when showing me a chart. The way her fingers would linger when handing me instruments during procedures. It was torture. Beautiful, exquisite torture. The breaking point came during our 3rd week of this delicious torment. I was updating patient files in the nurses. Station when she appeared beside me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something light and floral that made me think of spring mornings. "You're staring," she murmured without looking up from her own charts. My response was automatic, defensive. "You're distracting." She finally met my gaze, and the intensity there nearly knocked me over. Her thumb brushed against my wrist as she reached for a pen, and the contact sent electricity shooting up my arm. "Good," she whispered, and the simple word contained multitudes. Down the hall, a gurney rattled as paramedics rushed in with another emergency. Reality crashed back over us like cold water, and we sprang apart, professional masks sliding back into place. But something had been acknowledged in that moment. Something that couldn't be taken back. The night everything changed, really changed, was 3 weeks later. Mass casualty event. A bus accident on the interstate involving a youth soccer team. 12 hours of chaos, blood, miracles, and heartbreak. I performed emergency surgeries on 2 kids who shouldn't have survived. And somehow, by the grace of whatever deity watches over surgeons and small children, they both pulled through. By the time the last patient was stable, I was running on fumes and adrenaline. My scrubs were stained with more bodily fluids than I cared to identify. My hair felt like it was cemented to my scalp, and every muscle in my body screamed for rest. The locker room was empty, a rare blessing in a hospital that never truly sleeps. I was peeling off my surgical gown when I heard the door open behind me. "You saved 3 lives today." Cassandra's voice was soft, almost reverent. I turned to find her blocking the exit, still in her trauma-based scrubs, her hair disheveled and her eyes holding that same intensity I'd seen weeks ago. 4, I corrected tiredly. The Henderson kid made it too. 4 then. She stepped closer. "When do you get taken care of?" The question hung in the air between us. I opened my mouth to deflect, to make some joke about doctor's orders and healing myself, but she was already moving, closing the distance between us. "Cassandra, we can't," I started, but my protest died when her fingers found the knot of tension in my shoulder. "Tell me to stop," she challenged, her voice barely above a whisper. Her lips grazed my neck, and I swear I saw stars. Not the kind you see when you're exhausted, the kind you see when every nerve ending in your body suddenly comes alive. I couldn't tell her to stop. I couldn't do anything but moan as she worked her magic on muscles I didn't even know were sore. Her hands were everywhere, my shoulders, my back, tangling in my hair as she pulled me closer. The sound of my back hitting the lockers echoed through the empty room, and then her mouth was on mine, and nothing else mattered. Not the hospital, not our jobs, not the 1,000 reasons why this was complicated. She kissed me like she was drowning, and I was oxygen, like she'd been wanting to do this for weeks, which I realized with a start she probably had. I know I had been dreaming about it. When she dropped to her knees, yanking paper towels from the dispenser to spread on the floor, I thought I might actually die from want. "Cassandra," I gasped, but it came out more like a plea than a protest. "Let me take care of you," she whispered against my skin. "Please, Hannah, let me." And God help me, I did. For 3 blissful weeks, we lived in stolen moments. Supply closets became our secret meeting places. Night shifts became opportunities for clandestine encounters. The on-call room became our sanctuary. I'd never been happier or more terrified. Cassandra had mentioned her ex-boyfriend a few times, David something. From what I gathered, they dated for 2 years before she ended things about 6 months ago. She'd been vague about the details, and I hadn't pushed. Everyone has relationship baggage, right? I should have pushed. The first sign of trouble was the phone calls. Her cell would ring at odd hours, and she'd decline them with increasing irritation. "Just David being David," she'd say with forced lightness. "He'll get the hint eventually." But David, as it turned out, was not the hint-taking type. It started small. Flowers delivered to the hospital with cards that made Cassandra's face go pale. Text messages that had her changing her number. Then came the late-night drives past her apartment, the coincidental appearances at her grocery store, her gym, her favorite coffee shop. Maybe we should involve security, I suggested one evening as we sat in my car outside her building, watching for any sign of his blue pickup truck. And tell them what? That my ex-boyfriend is sending me flowers and occasionally shopping at the same Target? Cassandra shook her head. I can handle David. But David wasn't just sending flowers anymore. The morning I found my car tires slashed was the morning everything escalated. 4 perfectly good tires destroyed and carved into the rubber of each one. DYK in jagged, angry letters. I called Cassandra immediately. He knows about us, I said without preamble when she answered. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Cass, I'm here. Her voice was small, scared. Hannah, I'm so sorry. I never thought I didn't know he was watching. Where are you? Hospital. But Hannah, maybe we should stay there. I'm coming to get you. I took a cab to the hospital, my mind racing through possibilities. How long had he been watching us? What else did he know? More importantly, what else was he capable of? I found Cassandra in the trauma bay, trying to pretend everything was normal, but I could see the fear in her eyes. When I pulled her aside, she broke down. I should have told you more about him, she sobbed against my shoulder. He didn't take the breakup well. He said terrible things about getting me back, about making sure no one else could have me if he couldn't. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I thought it was just talk. David's always been dramatic, but I never thought he'd actually. She gestured helplessly. I never thought he'd hurt anyone else. That's when her pager went off. Then, mine, emergency in OR4. As we rushed toward the operating room, Cassandra grabbed my arm. There, she whispered, pointing toward the observation deck above the OR. David stood there, hands pressed against the glass, watching us with an expression that made my blood run cold. Hospital security was supposed to prevent unauthorized access to the surgical floors, but David had been visiting Cassandra at work for 2 years. Everyone knew him. No one questioned his presence. Until now. Security to OR4, Cassandra's voice came over the hospital PA system, professional and calm despite the panic I could see in her eyes. By the time security arrived, David was gone. But his message was clear. He could get to us anywhere. We need to stop seeing each other. The words hit me like a physical blow. We were standing in the supply closet where we'd shared our first real kiss, and Cassandra was breaking my heart with tears streaming down her face. Bullshit, I managed, my voice cracking. Hannah, he's escalating. What if he tries to hurt you? What if he comes after you with something worse than tire slashing? She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving streaks of the sanitizer residue on her cheeks. I can't live with myself if something happens to you because of me. So, what, we just pretend this never happened? Pretend we don't feel what we feel. We have to. But even as she said it, she was stepping closer to me. It's the only way to keep you safe. What about keeping you safe? She laughed bitterly. I've been dealing with David for months. I can handle him, but you... She reached up to cup my cheek. You've already been through enough because of me. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that I'd rather face 1,000 Davids than lose her. But the fear in her eyes was real, and her love for me, even in this moment of ending, was real too. This isn't over, I whispered. It has to be. She kissed me then, soft and desperate and final. It tasted like tears and goodbye and all the words we couldn't say. For 3 weeks, we maintained professional distance, polite nods in the hallway, formal consultations when required by our jobs. No lingering glances, no stolen moments, no secret smiles. It was the longest 3 weeks of my life. But Cassandra was right about David escalating. 2 weeks into our forced separation, he showed up at the hospital with a knife, demanding to see her. When security tried to remove him, he threatened to cut up anyone who tried to keep him from his girlfriend. The fact that she wasn't his girlfriend, hadn't been for 8 months, and was currently dating a woman seemed irrelevant to David's version of reality. He was arrested that night, charged with criminal threatening, possession of a weapon on hospital property, and violating the restraining order Cassandra had finally gotten the week before. David's trial became the talk of the hospital. Not because it was particularly romantic, he pled guilty to avoid a longer sentence, but because it forced Cassandra and me back into each other's orbit. As witnesses, we had to coordinate our testimonies with the prosecutor. We sat in sterile conference rooms, recounting the timeline of harassment while trying to ignore the electricity that still sparked between us. Every time our hands accidentally touched reaching for the same document, he received a 2-year sentence. The prosecutor informed us after David's sentencing. With the restraining order in place and his probation terms, he won't be allowed within 500 feet of either of you or the hospital. Relief flooded through me, but it was tempered by uncertainty. Now that the threat was gone, where did that leave us? Cassandra seemed to be wondering the same thing. As we left the courthouse, she caught my arm. "Coffee?" she asked, and the word contained so much hope it made my chest ache. "It's 2 p.m., I replied, echoing our first conversation. "Exactly. Prime coffee time." We took it slow this time. Real dates, dinner at restaurants, movies, walks in the park. Getting to know each other outside the high-stress environment of the hospital. Learning that Cassandra collected vintage postcards and made the world's best chocolate chip cookies. Discovering that she cried during commercials with cute animals and could quote every line from The Princess Bride. I told her about my childhood in small-town Ohio, about the mother who raised me to believe I could be anything, about the moment I decided to become a surgeon after watching doctors save my father's life following his heart attack. She shared stories of growing up in Texas with 3 brothers who taught her to be tough, about choosing nursing because she wanted to be the person holding patients' hands during their scariest moments, about the gradual realization that she was attracted to women and the courage it took to come out to her conservative family. They came around, she assured me one evening as we lay tangled in her bed, fingers tracing lazy patterns on each other's skin. It took time, but they came around. They just want me to be happy. "And are you?" I asked, pressing a kiss to her collarbone. "Happy, I mean." She pulled back to look at me, her green eyes serious. "Happier than I've ever been." 6 months after David's arrest, Cassandra came to me with an idea that would change both our lives. "What if we started a clinic?" she said over breakfast, spreading blueprints across my kitchen table. "A clinic? An LGBTQ plus health center? Somewhere people like us can get care without judgment, without having to explain our relationships or our lives to doctors who might not understand." Her excitement was infectious. "I've been researching grants, and there's funding available. The city is actually looking for proposals for underserved healthcare initiatives." I studied the plans she'd sketched out. Exam rooms, a small surgical suite, mental health counseling offices, community meeting spaces. "This is incredible, Cass. But it would be a huge undertaking. The licensing alone, I know. That's why I need a partner. Someone with surgical credentials and administrative experience." She looked at me hopefully. "Someone who believes in the mission as much as I do." The answer was easy. Yes, 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 yes. I'll be your partner in this and everything else. Her smile could have powered the entire hospital. The Perry Russell GBTQ plus Health Center opened on a crisp October morning, exactly 2 years after that first night in the trauma bay. Local politicians came for the ribbon cutting, along with hospital administrators, community leaders, and what felt like half the city's LGBTQ plus population. I stood next to Cassandra as she addressed the crowd, proud beyond words of what we'd built together. Not just the clinic, though, that was an achievement in itself, but the relationship, the partnership, the life we'd created. This center represents hope, Cassandra was saying into the microphone. Hope that everyone deserves quality healthcare delivered with dignity and respect. Hope that love in all its forms will be celebrated and protected. As she spoke, I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought us here. The professional distance that became personal connection. The crisis that nearly tore us apart. The courage it took to rebuild and dream bigger. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was perfect. Photos were taken, hands were shaken, tours were given. But as the crowd began to thin and the reporters packed up their equipment, I realized there was something I needed to say. Something I'd been thinking about for months, but hadn't found the courage to voice. I waited until we were alone in what would be Cassandra's office, looking out at the small garden we'd planted in the courtyard. Cass, she turned from the window, still glowing with the success of the day. And that's when she spoke the words that changed everything. Marry me. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. What? Marry me, she repeated, more firmly this time. Not in some operating room between emergencies, not in a supply closet between shifts. Right here, in this place we built together, where we heal people. My laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep in my chest, pure joy mixed with disbelief. Took you long enough, Nurse Perry? Is that a yes, Dr. Russell? Instead of answering with words, I kissed her. Right there in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows where anyone walking by could see us. I kissed her like it was the first time and the last time and every time in between. When we finally broke apart, she was grinning. I'll take that as a yes. That's definitely a yes. The local news picked up the story. Local healthcare heroes announce engagement at clinic opening, and the clip of our kiss made the evening broadcast. But what the cameras didn't catch was what Cassandra whispered in my ear as we waved to the crowd. I'll see you in the supply closet later. Some things, thank God, never change. We were married 6 months later in the clinic's main reception area, surrounded by friends, family, colleagues, and patients whose lives we touched. My mother flew in from Ohio and immediately adopted Cassandra as the daughter she'd always wanted. Cassandra's family drove up from Texas in a convoy of pickup trucks, her 3 brothers serving as both her groomsmen and my protection detail. The ceremony was officiated by Dr. Martinez, our former department head, who had watched our relationship develop from professional respect to personal devotion. In his remarks, he talked about the healing power of love, not just the love between partners, but the love for community, for service, for making the world a little bit better. Love, he said, is the best medicine. And these 2 women have been prescribing it to each other and to their patients every day. When it came time for vows, I spoke about finding home in unexpected places in a trauma bay at 3 a.m., in stolen moments between crises, in the steady strength of hands that could calm chaos and heal hurt. Cassandra talked about courage to love openly, to build something meaningful, to choose hope over fear every single day. Hannah taught me that the heart is just another muscle, she said, tears streaming down her face. And like any muscle, it grows stronger with use. So I promise to love you with all my strength every day for the rest of our lives. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. That was 5 years ago. As I sit here now, watching our wedding ring catch the afternoon light, I think about how far we've come. The clinic serves over 3,000 patients a year. We've expanded twice, adding a pharmacy and a mental health wing. Cassandra completed her nurse practitioner degree and now runs the primary care division. I still perform surgeries at the main hospital, but spend most of my time here, doing everything from routine physicals to complex procedures. We've been featured in medical journals, healthcare magazines, and LGBTQ plus publications. We've spoken at conferences and testified before state committees about the importance of inclusive healthcare. We've watched dozens of our colleagues find the courage to come out, knowing they have a supportive community. But the thing I'm most proud of isn't the awards or the recognition. It's the quiet moments. The elderly trans woman who cried when we used her correct pronouns. The teenage boy whose parents finally understood after we helped them navigate resources for supporting their gay son. The couple who wanted to start a family and trusted us to help them through the process. It's Cassandra, still taking her coffee black with cinnamon, still calming frightened patients with just a smile, still finding reasons to pull me into supply closets for impromptu kisses. It's the life we built from a moment of connection in a trauma bay, strengthened by crisis, and sustained by the simple decision to choose love over fear, hope over despair, healing over hurt. People still ask me how I knew she was the one. And I tell them I knew because she made me braver. Not just in love, but in life. She made me believe that two people could build something bigger than themselves, something that would outlast them both. She made me believe in happy endings and in supply closets, especially supply closets. The woman finishes her story with a smile, her hand unconsciously moving to rest over her heart. Outside the cafe window, life continues its chaotic, beautiful dance, but in this moment, surrounded by the golden light of late afternoon, there is only love, memory, and the quiet satisfaction of a story well told.